Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tealium webinar, Why Real-Time Data Matters, Realizing True Customer Lifetime Value. My name is Matt Parisi. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Tealium, and I am joined by a special guest, Rusty Warner from Forrester, who will be leading today's presentation and going over kind of what are the benefits of real-time data? What does real-time data even really mean? So Rusty will kick us off. He'll have about 25 minutes kind of covering market trends and what brands are doing out there around real-time data. I'll finish us off with about 5 or 10 minutes kind of about the technological or architectural approach to using technology to unlock real-time use cases. So with that, though, why don't we hop right in? Rusty, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be with everyone today. As Matt said, my name is Rusty Warner, and I'm a vice president and principal analyst with Forrester. Despite my name and the American accent, I'm based in the UK. So I'm speaking to you today from our London office. At Forrester, I cover enterprise marketing technology, but I sit on one of our customer experience teams. And so that gives me an interesting perspective when I'm talking to brands, just like all of you, about their data and the way they capture data and use that data, not only for marketing purposes, but also for that bigger customer experience set of use cases that they may have. So we're going to start with the customer experience. And just to level set, we really think of the customer experience as more than just that single interaction when the customer is engaging on a digital channel. Sure, that is an experience, but customer experience would be the total of all the interactions that your customer is having with the brand and what they take away from that in terms of their perception of value that they have gotten from those interactions. And as we know ourselves as consumers, many times when we go to a brand, we have something in mind. We are looking for something, we maybe need something, or we have a problem that we want to solve, and we want to do that immediately. And we expect the brand to react accordingly and be able to serve us in a context that makes sense. So if we think of those moments adding up to this more holistic customer experience that we might have, that moment will take on special meaning and importance for us as we're engaging with the brand. And a lot of that moment will have to do with the touch point or the device. So there's a lot that happens on the glass. And we know that moving forward, there will be a lot of evolution in the technology that we all hold in our hands or carry around in our pockets every day. There will be virtual reality and augmented reality and facial recognition and voice recognition and generative AI and so forth. But that's a whole presentation on its own. And so what Matt and I are going to focus on today is what happens below the glass. We're going to look at what you can already do today in terms of capturing data and intelligence that you can use to better serve your customers. Because we think there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. To the customer, we want it to feel like everything is happening right there on the glass while they're interacting with our brand. But in reality, there will be a lot that is going on underneath the covers where we are processing data and using that data to make better decisions about how to serve that customer and make sure they get what they want immediately and in the appropriate context. So that leads me to something that we call real-time interaction management at Forrester. And this is one of the technology categories that I focus on in my coverage. In fact, if you're familiar with the Forrester Wave evaluation, I conduct a Forrester Wave evaluation looking at vendors in the real-time interaction management space. But the space itself is much bigger than the wave and the vendors that are in that wave. It includes a lot of different ecosystem components, Tealium very much included, because Tealium shows up in many of the environments of the customers who are implementing these real-time interaction management environments. To do RTIM, you need continuous real-time streaming data, and not only the ability to ingest that data, but to activate it, because you're going to use it for multiple aspects of what will happen below the glass. First and foremost, you'll need to recognize your customers. So that's going to involve authenticated recognition, as well as identity resolution for your anonymous customers. And we want to do that at an individual level so that we can personalize what's going to happen for that individual. We need to capture a lot of real-time context. I keep mentioning that word, but it is so important for us to understand what the customer is looking for right now, but not just right now. We need to merge that with history. We need to understand how this interaction fits into the context of other interactions the customer may have had with us. We then will apply artificial intelligence, predictive models, machine learning, lots of advanced analytics that we will apply to that data, as well as business logic, so that we can make the right decision about how to best serve that customer. We'll then obviously need to activate or orchestrate and manage the interaction with the customer. And then we'll capture even more data based on that interaction so that we can optimize the experience with the customer. If I look at real-time interaction management visually, it's a very complex, sophisticated picture, as you can see here. I have all of those customer touch points. I'm capturing data to recognize the customer and the current context. I'm making a decision about what should happen next, and I'm orchestrating that decision. But perhaps most importantly, I'm constantly capturing that streaming data in real time so that I can optimize. I'll be capturing customer insights as well as business insights when I am ingesting that data and that intelligence. And I will want to optimize what's happening with an individual customer in the moment, as well as what should happen next, and how I will optimize that customer's overall experience with the brand across multiple interactions. But I'll also want to collectively use that intelligence so that I can optimize my customer strategy. So this isn't just a one-to-one relationship with an individual customer. It collectively provides me the insights I need to optimize my overall business strategy. Now, you may have noticed NBX written here, because we do believe that you should focus on the next best experience. And I'd like to take just a minute to go into that, because experience is an aspiration for most of the organizations I talk to. Many companies do next best product or next best offer. Some are involved in next best action, but next best experience is something that we see just starting to take off for many organizations. And the differences here are subtle, but they're important. So next best product is just what it says. I can make a product recommendation. Making a next best offer is when I bundle that product with other information and content. Maybe it's the right discount. Maybe the offer is available for a specific amount of time, or it's a special offer where only some of my customers are eligible. An action then is something I would like the customer to do from the brand perspective. So maybe I've just received a new credit card or a store card, but I need to activate that card before I can use it. That would be an example of an action. Experience, on the other hand, is more focused on the customer's goal and the customer's outcome. So while next best product, next best offer, and next best action are really inside out, next best experience is you putting yourselves in the shoes of your customer and making a decision that is aligned with what the customer would like to achieve at that particular moment or during that particular interaction. It might help if I put that in the context of a real world use case here. So this happens to be financial services, where if I use the mortgage calculator on my bank's website, the appropriate product for me might well be a mortgage. But then I'd have to think about the appropriate offer. Uh, am I a first time home buyer? Or am I looking to remortgage? Or am I looking to apply for a mortgage for a second home or a holiday home in another country? That might change the offer around the product. And then in terms of action, perhaps I start on my mortgage application, and for whatever reason, I get busy, life gets in the way, and I don't finish the application. But I've started. So the right next best action would be to convince me to come back and to finish that application process. But next best experience would be a little bit different. That would say that maybe we detect that the customer is having concerns, or maybe they just don't understand the differences between different types of mortgage products. And so the appropriate next best experience is additional information or education that will help that customer and give them a peace of mind about their financial well-being, instead of promoting a particular product or trying to get them to complete an application when in fact there's some concern in their mind that might prevent them from doing that. If you think of next best experience as the natural evolution here and how we have to become more focused on the customer, that embodies what Forrester would call customer obsession. And I know customer obsession sounds like hyperbole, but we do mean it. And we've even built a framework around what it means to be customer obsessed. It's not just a tagline, and it's not just for marketing. It is a business orientation that starts with your leadership, it permeates through your strategy, and it extends all the way down to your operations so that you're making better decisions with your customers in mind, using all of those insights that you're able to capture about your customer behavior. And when you think about the customer, you have to think about that entire customer journey. That will include some of what marketers are very good at, those cross channel campaigns, which primarily happen on an outbound basis, where we are making product recommendations or bundling those products into attractive offers. So that's fine. Our campaigns that we operate on a daily basis are good as long as they are relevant and personalized to those individuals. But beyond those outbound campaigns, we have to think about what happens when the customer comes to us. What is the context when a customer opens the app or comes to the website? How can we ensure that anything that we are communicating to them is appropriate based on their behavior? And so, if we can link our campaigns with contextually relevant responses, that is going to take us a long way toward being able to offer next best experience. Those moments might be a little bit more elusive for people because moments will be dependent on how well you know customers and what those customer preferences might be for how they want to interact with you as a brand. So, for a subset of your customers where they're happy to share information, they like the relationship with you, you can become more anticipatory. You can predict what might be appropriate. And in some cases, you can automate that in a way that will bring the customer exactly what they are looking for in that moment of need. As you're doing that, though, I would tell you to keep in mind that you cannot deliver value. And that probably sounds like a strange thing for me to say, but we really believe that you don't deliver value. You deliver products and services. Your customers will, or in some cases will not, realize value, but they'll do that on their own terms. They might realize economic value because their perception is they paid the right price for your product or service. They might get functional value. For example, if I buy an umbrella and it keeps me dry in a rainstorm, then I'll feel like I got functional value from that. It might be pure experiential value. I enjoy engaging with the brand, or maybe you are in the hospitality industry, and the experience and how I feel when I come and stay at your hotel or come to your spa is why I like working with you or as a brand. Or it might be purely symbolic. I might like wearing certain logos because they make me feel good about myself. Or I might enjoy buying products and services from a brand that holds values that are similar to mine with regard to recycling or other things that might be important to me from a societal perspective. But remember, you're not delivering that value. The customer is going to realize that value. So, what you should strive for is becoming an indispensable component of how your customers realize value. To do that, if you're in marketing, I would challenge you to change your focus, because most marketers I talk to are really good at customer acquisition. They're really good at everything that leads up to the purchase or the commitment to the brand. But then it gets handed off to somebody else in CRM or support or service or whatever. But again, customers are going to realize value as they use your product or service. That is primarily going to happen post purchase. And so your goal as a marketer should be to figure out, how do you ensure that you're part of that value realization that happens post purchase? And that leads us to the theme of the webinar today. You saw in the title that Matt showed you that we're focused on true customer lifetime value. What do we mean by that? Well, many marketers unfortunately think of customer lifetime value as historical orders or cumulative revenue. It's a backward looking metric. That is not the way customer lifetime value is defined and used by a CFO or a finance department. Customer lifetime value is a forward looking profit contribution model. Sure, it considers revenue, but it's the revenue I'm likely to get from working with particular customers. It also includes the retention rate, which is reflected as survival because it's looking at a specific moment in time. And then it will factor in the acquisition cost and the servicing costs for that individual customer. Marketing can't do this on its own. No matter how much data you're collecting, you'll need to work with a data science team to build a true customer lifetime value model. You'll need to work with your finance team to figure out how all of the data you're collecting would feed into this kind of customer lifetime value viewpoint, which is forward looking and thinking about profit and thinking about your return on investment. And a lot of marketers think of customer lifetime value as a very long term metric. It might be if you're in the life insurance industry, but for most of you, a long customer lifetime value model will be 3 years. A short one will be about a year, maybe a year and a half, because again, we're looking forward and trying to forecast profit contribution and think about how we can leverage all of that data, turn it into insights, and make marketing an indispensable part of the brand, and in turn, make the brand an indispensable part of the value realization network of each of your customers. As you're thinking about that, you need to shy away from one mistake that I think many marketers make in particular, and that is a focus on personalization tactics that are geared at activation or acquisition and conversion. They're focused on that very early part of the customer life cycle, trying to convince me that I should do something or I should buy something. And if that's where you're focused, you probably have a disjointed view of that more holistic customer experience, which is made up of all of those moments and all of those interactions that I talked about. And if that's where you're focused, there is unfortunately a big opportunity to get things wrong. And I'd like to share with you an example from my personal experience there. These, I think you will agree, are lovely photographs. I took these photographs last June when I was in the Rocky Mountains. This happens to be the Sundance Resort. If you've been lucky enough to be there, I can recommend it. It is gorgeous. Utah got a lot of snow uh, during the winter a year ago. And so there was still snow on the ground as we were getting into late spring and almost early summer. So I was there and I had the good fortune to ride the chairlift and go to the top of the mountain and check out all of this beautiful scenery and all of the waterfalls coming down because of the snow melt. Now, while I was there from the UK, I obviously had my mobile, which is, of course, on a UK network contract. I flew into Utah. I rented a car. I stayed in a hotel. I even went to an outdoor store and bought some new hiking trousers because the ones I took weren't warm enough, as it turns out. So I was using my credit card and I was using my phone. So I was generating a lot of real time data. Unfortunately, a retailer in Utah decided that based on that data, they would serve me this ad for Father's Day. And you can see what is in the ad without me calling it out to you. And I did grow up in West Virginia. So in my distant past, I have fired a hunting rifle, but I don't own a gun. I would never touch a handgun. I live in the UK, so probably could buy one anyway. I'm not a father, and my own father passed away many years ago. So this ad was so inappropriate on many levels. And in fact, I found it offensive. And I hope that none of you have ever done anything to offend your customers. But I'm sure if you think hard about it, you probably can come up with at least one or two examples where you may have put something in front of your customers that wasn't contextually relevant to them. And that's what happens if we focus too much on using our real time data to personalize the acquisition process. Now, I don't want to end on that note. I'd rather end on a positive note. So here's a good example. And this happens to be from here in the UK with the NatWest Group, a banking group. And one of the brands within the group is the Royal Bank of Scotland. If you ask anyone in the Royal Bank of Scotland about mobile banking, they will have a different definition than what you might think with a mobile device, because they were doing mobile banking years ago. They trained their bankers to be van drivers, and they put those vans on ferries to remote islands off the north coast of Scotland, and they delivered banking services to people in their homes and to small businesses on those islands. So if you fast forward to the digital age, Royal Bank of Scotland wanted to replicate that same level of customer experience, but do that using digital channels. So their personology program was born, people and technology, where they would come up with ways to focus on better serving the customer. That led them to completely reorganize their product groups and their technology teams. So they took product managers and converted them to be customer outcome owners or customer goal owners. Those people then worked with the data science team and the technology team to tune the models that they were using to better serve customer outcomes instead of next best product or next best offer. And as part of doing that, they needed to collaborate across those teams and bring a level of consistency to the way they serve customers, whether that was a digital channel, whether it was via the telephone, or in some cases when people were walking into the bank branch. And they did see great results from doing this. In fact, they're still enjoying the return on investment from this project. It continues. I've been talking to them since 2014, and I just spoke with them recently, and the program continues. But they see about $30 million a year in revenue, which is a 30% uplift for them. They find that about 40% of all their new loan sales and loan products come via this solution. And in fact, they make fewer offers to their customers but have much higher success rates in terms of customers who will complete those applications and then end up as customers for certain products. So good. There's a good example. Didn't want to end on my rather negative experience in Utah. And Matt, with that, I'll hand it back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rusty. So funny to think about mobile banking in the physical realm. That's a funny example. But changing gears, of course, to make all of this happen, you have to use technology and tools, and even beyond the technology and tools. Rusty talked about kind of the working together and the collaboration across the customer journey, because as we've seen more and more. Silos are breaking down, and customer experience is becoming more of a holistic thing to the benefit of the customer ultimately. Before I hop into this content, I did want to address one of the questions I saw come in. So if you are having issues with the resolution, there is a little gear in the lower right hand side of the video where you can turn up your resolution if you've got the bandwidth to handle it. We will also upload this deck to the attachments section on the webinar page, so you'll be able to download it after we're done. And I wanted to have a quick reminder: if you do have questions, we're going to have a little bit of Q&A at the very end. So feel free and throw your questions into the question area right now, and in about 5 or 10 minutes, we'll get to those questions. So hopping into what, like I said, looking at kind of the technology landscape, or the, how to think about implementing real-time technology. One way that we think it's helpful to look at your data and how to power real-time experiences is by thinking about your data in terms of a data supply chain. And the data supply chain is basically just, breaking up the life cycle of data from the time the data is born during an interaction to the time that data is used to trigger, one of the real-time experiences that Rusty kind of just described. And in each stage here, there are things that have to happen to the data in order for your real-time use cases to be possible. So when you are planning real-time use cases, definitely think about it in terms of a data supply chain. Work backwards from what that customer experience is that you want and where you're activating that data, and then work backwards to figure out, okay, what is the data foundation that I need to activate that experience, and what are the criteria basically that I'll recognize in that moment that matters to trigger that experience. And as Rusty alluded to, it's going to take a bit of a constellation of technologies. Just looking at Tealium alone, we have listed kind of a bunch of different processes of the data that can happen in real time or not. And I'll highlight a few of these things. Depending on your data source, that data may be more accessible or less accessible in real time. Things like the website and the mobile app are generally a little bit easier to get access to than maybe your CRM, where the data has kind of come to rest versus being more in motion. And then looking at the processing of the data, resolving identity. Rusty talked about being able to do that in real time as somebody moves through the customer journey and across venues can be somewhat of a challenging task. So some of that might happen in real time, but some of that might, be a process that happens afterwards. That's more of a batch analysis process. So if you want to address someone in real time, you need to figure out who they are in real time too. So definitely, thinking about that processing stage and making sure that that's happening in real time. Then we have access. So how can you get that access to that insight in real time? Now, you're going to have a lot of technologies, personalization systems, maybe multi-channel, campaign management tools that might have a narrow kind of view, but a very deep understanding in that narrow kind of silo. Whereas something like a CDP is going to have more of a layer of intelligence that's more, can be a little bit broader and bring in more data sources. So how that data is available, again, is going to impact what use cases you are able to pull off. we actually have a new API that we refer to as the Moments API. Funnily enough, for the topic of the webinar here, and basically it's on-demand access to any data inside of Tealium, and that can be through an application that your organization has built from the ground up, or that can be through another application that might be serving the experience but needs the intelligence from the CDP. Then we get into segmentation, recognizing what audience someone might be in, and then that leads to activation, which Rusty mentioned. Not a trivial consideration, being able to activate what you're able to activate in real time. So by taking that data supply chain kind of approach or that view, you can kind of understand and scope out what needs to happen in order to power a real-time experience. And as Rusty alluded to, this is definitely going to be kind of an enterprise-wide, if you want to build the most effective program, it's going to be enterprise-wide. Of course, there will be times when you want to start in a certain department and then build out from there as part of a crawl, walk, run approach. But where we see this play out a lot is with customer or cloud data warehouses. So cloud data warehouses are becoming more popular. Virtually, every organization is at a different state of maturity with their data warehouse, whether their data warehouse is, pristine and nice and clean and readily actionable, or if it's more of a data swamp. You may have heard that kind of term before. Sometimes people have their data lakes actually turn into data swamps that are a little bit harder to deal with, but they are rich repositories of data. These days, enterprises more often than not have almost too much data that they're working with, and they need to figure out, how do I find, the gold amongst, all of the false signals. And that's ultimately where we think the customer data platform kind of comes in. The customer data platform can be that real-time view of the customer that inherits, the important parts of the lifetime view, but ultimately can give you context in that moment of what that person's trying to accomplish in order to give them that next best experience. Because there is this tension between, the depth of data you have and being able to act in real time. So, thinking about, what data or what insights are at rest and can kind of be staged for real-time activation, or what are you going to be learning in the moment that's going to meet some criteria to trigger an experience ultimately. And by marrying these two systems, which generally is the marrying of different departments within an organization, usually the IT team is owning the data warehouse and the marketing team is much more involved with the customer data platform. This can be, a topic that you kind of have to work out structurally within the organization. But, without having a CDP in the picture, generally it's just a little bit messier of, kind of a situation. You kind of have siloed experiences that are happening in real time, but they don't have the full breadth of context of what might be happening. Whereas the cloud data warehouse has full context, lifetime context, more context than enough to serve a next best experience, but ultimately usually is being used with batch processes that aren't, prepared to act in that moment when criteria are kind of met. And by adding a CDP kind of in tandem with the cloud data warehouse, you're kind of able to get more agility, between how you want to power a particular customer experience, and your overall system becomes more powerful because you have that extra gear basically where it is real time. And like Rusty mentioned, it does take a little bit of a different mindset as you're kind of scoping out, real time experiences. It's more of a forward looking process than kind of a backwards looking pulling of a list kind of a situation that are very, very common in marketing departments. So, by marrying your CDP with your data warehouse, or it could be a CRM system, wherever the bulk or the center of gravity of your customer data is sitting at rest, you kind of get these extra capabilities that boil down to being able to more efficiently and effectively manage data, but also being able to trigger, richer and more elaborate customer experiences. So from the data management side, usually, real-time use cases are going to make you think ahead to what data you need available and where that data is going to go before the data is born, so that when those criteria are met, you can trigger that real-time experience. By thinking about it ahead of time, you can land that data closer to where it needs to go and manage it at the time of creation to save yourself a lot of post-processing headaches and operational kind of inefficiencies. On the customer experience side, you get to inform an experience based on what the person was actually doing. So instead of me having to go through the call center and tell the agent my life story of of what I've bought and what I own and what I was just trying to look at to solve on the website, that intelligence is sitting in front of the agent so that they can actually say, oh, I see you were actually trying to solve this problem. Is that what you need help with? And then I can get to the value much quicker, which is ultimately where customers are able to realize value and become loyal to the brand. There's a lot that goes into that, and I kind of covered it at a very high level. But know that there's a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge out there around these topics, whether from Rusty or whether from Tealium ourselves, and we're more than happy to sit down and talk about these challenges in your unique ecosystem, because ultimately every enterprise is kind of dealing with a somewhat unique data landscape. So that brings us to the end of our talk here, and we are more than willing to sit here for we got about 10 minutes where we can kind of ask questions of Rusty. I've got a couple of questions that I have for Rusty, but I see a couple of questions have come in. So if you do have a question, type those in right now, but we will get started on the questions, Rusty. So first question, Rusty, you talked about the customer obsessed model. How do you see that playing out in the B2B vertical?
Yeah, it applies to B2B and B2B2C as well as it does to a business to consumer model. I happen to focus on business to consumer MarTech, so my examples were more consumer oriented, but it definitely does apply. In fact, I think if we consider that in the B2B world, purchase decisions are usually more considered and they're for a bigger dollar amount, there's all the more reason to think about what that customer needs, what they're going to use it for, how do they prefer interacting with us, how do they prefer to purchase. So using those insights to improve our go-to-market strategy in many ways is even more critical. And then secondly, even though we're selling to businesses in the B2B world, we are engaging with people. We are engaging with individuals, and more people expect that same level of digital experience in their professional lives as they have in their personal lives as consumers. And so the more we can think about the different people within an account in the B2B world who might be part of that purchase decision, maybe downstream users of the product or service, and how we can tailor the decision-making process to those people, the better. So I think customer obsession has a role to play regardless of your business model.
Yeah, I think a lot of maturity growth there possible. Sometimes I feel like as an employee at a tech company, I get targeted by a lot of the B2B marketing where it's like, oh, you work here, so you must care about these things. Like, oh, I'm more of an individual than I am an employee of the company I work for. So interesting. Cool. So we got another question here. Might need more details on this one, but the question is how to optimize CRM for buy, incentive, rewards, loyalty program management. You got an answer for Pelham?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, obviously, if you're talking more from your customer experience strategy and how you want to go to market and what loyalty means as part of your expression of customer obsession, that we could spend days on from a strategic perspective. But if I think about it more from the data and the tech perspective, which I'm hoping is your context given our topic today, I would say that there's a tendency for organizations to buy a CRM and buy a marketing automation and buy a loyalty platform and maybe buy a CDP or multiple CDPs. And those are purchased separately because they were investments you made because you needed them to fulfill a certain purpose for the organization. But I would take a step back and I would look at my customer experience and marketing and CRM as an ecosystem. I wouldn't think of it as a stack. I wouldn't think of it as a platform. I would think of it as an ecosystem where there is no real hub and spoke. There are multiple important components across that ecosystem that might be responsible for managing the interactions with customers, either certain uh, uh, audiences or maybe at certain points in the customer life cycle. So I would think of as an ecosystem, and I would look at how I could optimize my investments in data and analytics for customer understanding, how I could optimize my investments in my operational and measurement tools, and finally, how I could optimize my investments in automation and the experience delivery tools. And think about it holistically. What I'm getting at here is if you invest in a loyalty program that has its own CDP and its own email for execution, that's fine. But if that's not coordinated with the CDP and the marketing automation platform that might be sending email campaigns from another part of the organization, you're not doing yourselves any favors. So I'd say think of it as an ecosystem and try to strategize across the whole instead of looking at these individual pockets. Easier said than done, of course. And it looks like Matt has frozen on me. So I'll go ahead and look at this next question and see if I can take it. What are some typical challenges that companies face when trying to go after real-time use cases? What are some areas that are underestimated? That's a great question because, or two great questions, because there are challenges from a technology perspective when you start to look at this ecosystem and how the components fit together. You need to establish an enterprise data strategy. And while you're doing that, which is going to take time, you have to make sure you don't cut off the data supply chain for front office functions like marketing or loyalty or customer service. So you kind of have to think about building out that strategy and deciding strategically what your tech investments are going to be without necessarily turning off things that are working today. And that is something that is very difficult. The other side of it is the organizational challenge. And I think that that's the part that people tend to underestimate. Just understanding how a change in our technology investment strategy might impact the processes that people are comfortable using and the mindset that people have fallen into. And so getting past some of those organizational challenges is perhaps the most difficult thing. In big enterprise organizations, I usually see a center of whatever kind of approach, whether that's a center of innovation, a center of excellence, a center of operations. There is a virtual team where there are representatives from lots of different parts of the organization that have a role to play in defining that strategy and ensuring that it's connected to all of the goals of these different parts of the organization. So that's usually what happens. It's not usually a big bang where someone in IT makes a decision or someone in marketing makes a decision and everyone else just follows along. It just doesn't work that way.
Cool. And Rusty, do you ever get anyone who kind of has this attitude where, maybe real time isn't worth the effort, or, like a few minutes is fine? How
Oh,
do you
yeah.
generally respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, even though that category I showed you earlier, which is real time interaction management, I wrote the definition for that about 10 years ago. The definition says the appropriate moment in the customer life cycle. So it might be a real time requirement, but maybe it's not. If you are in the kind of environment where you want to pick up on real time signals, uh, obviously there are operational use cases for that where I'm trying to detect fraud or a credit risk or other things. But from a customer facing perspective, maybe you're in the kind of business where if a customer is typing angrily or in a frustrated way into a chat bot, you want to pick up on that immediately so that you can reach out to that customer with a human touch and apply some empathy, and that will be critical. Then sure, real time definitely matters. But if it's somebody visited the website and used my mortgage calculator and I'd like to put a mortgage offer in front of them, you probably don't have to do that right there in the moment. In fact, if you do it there in the moment, chances are you'll get it wrong without a little bit more context. I think back to that example I showed you from Utah. If that outdoor retailer, if they had just come to me on Facebook and said, hey, while you're in Utah, come check us out. We've got a lot of products for your outdoor needs, and everything's on sale because it's coming up on Father's Day. I might have been inclined to go in because I would have certainly considered them for a purchase of trousers or hiking boots or something like that. But until I browsed their site to let them know that, what did they lead with? They led with those big margin items, which happen to be guns. And I'll never set foot in their store ever as a potential customer, even though I've got a platinum card and ready to spend some money. So your real time can be good and necessary. It might not always be the best approach. You can take a more measured view and try to capture more insight about the customer before you shoot first and ask questions later, if you'll pardon the metaphor.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times I think it's important to think about it from a flexibility standpoint too. There are times when it's going to be important. So like, why would you construct your engine or your system to not be able to hit that note when you need it? Expectations are only rising after all. So anyways, that was a great talk. Thanks, Rusty, so much. If anybody does want to connect with us afterwards, they're loading up the contact information here. So feel free to reach out if you have any further questions. Like I said, we'll upload the slide deck to the attachments screen after we end the talk today. And of course, we have some news. Tealium has some product news in relation to our Tealium Moments product, which is a collection of features meant to better cater to kind of these real-time moments in the customer journey that are linked in the attachment section as well. So we encourage you to check those out. And if you would like to see kind of how Tealium can help you, we are, of course, at your service. Other than that, though, hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you next time. We've got a collection of webinars coming. Check out the Tealium channel. See you then. Thanks, Rusty.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.